For listening to the Crappie Blog Crappie Cast. It's Matt Foster. Today's guest is Russ Bailey. Thanks for coming on the show, Russ.
Hey, man, glad to be here, Matt. It's always good to talk to you.
Absolutely. So if you would tell the folks listening a little bit about yourself.
Actually a retired police officer by trade. I retired as a sergeant for the St. Mary's, Ohio Police Department. Actually started out walleye fishing back in my younger days and bluegill like everybody else. And then tell you how I got hooked on crappie fishing is when I got the job at the St. Mary's Police Department, we had a lake there. And one night the guy said, hey, we're going crappie fishing after work. You want to go? And like I say, I was a walleye fisherman, so I'm thinking, crappie, them little fish, this and that. Well, I went out with those guys, and we're using these light rods and light tackle, and that was it, man. I was hooked, and started fishing a few tournaments, and one thing led to another. I've been blessed. I've been lucky. And I think being able to associate with some of the people I have is just been a blessing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've met so many and fished with so many great anglers since doing the brushpile fishing and everything else. I mean, it's just, and one thing I talk about all the time is how great the crappie fishing community is, you know.
You know, it's second to none, you know, and you hear a few bad stories, but all in all, and I go back a long ways because, you know, we had the Midwest crappie days. So I've taped with a lot of different guys, met a lot of different guys, and it has just been an outstanding experience.
Right. So one of the things that I'm asking anglers is, what are your top 5? If you had to pick top 5 products, must have, if I left them at home, I have to turn around and get them. If I run out of that product, I have to get it immediately ordered, or my day is just not right. And in no specific order, right?
Okay. Let's start out with rods, okay? And I'm going to surprise a lot of people because, as you know, I've got my own signature series rod, but my one I would not leave home without is a Sharpshooter 6. And
Why is that?
The reason I say that, you know, I love dock shooting,
right.
Okay, so I do a lot of that. But even to me, it's probably the most versatile rod that B&M has. And the reason I say that, of course, it's made for dock shooting. So if I want to go out dock shooting, I can do that. But it's also a great rod to put on the back of the boat to go long line trolling. You know, the other thing is, like, I normally, 90% of the time I'm using my 10.5 foot signature series. On real windy days, if I'm flipping a light jig, sometimes that line will get caught in the wind and never goes where I want it to. I can take that Sharpshooter 6 and shoot that jig, whether it's a shoreline, lay down, whatever I'm fishing. It keeps it low to the water, less wind resistance. So there's just so many different things you can do with that. You can vertical jig with it. Now, I don't prefer it for vertical jigging, but it's just one of the most versatile rods there is, and I think you can always find a way to fish with it.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's got a strong backbone to flip them in. I mean, there's so much about that rod that
it's got everything. And, you know, everybody talks sensitivity and all this, but in the handle of that, some of the cork is actually cut away to where your finger is on the blank itself. You talk about added sensation. You do
right.
feel everything. So, yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. So that's number 1.
Lord, you're putting me on the spot here. Okay. Number 2 is going to be, and it's not even on the market yet, it's going to be the Angry Roo bait by Crappie Magnet. You've been in on this. Jeff and I have worked on this thing for well over a year, and I can't tell you how many times it's changed, either by me or by Jeff, because there's just something we didn't like, this and that. We had to downsize it, this and that. But now we have the final mold, and it's perfect. And it's a great bait if they're active. I can cast it, I can shoot it under a dock, I can vertical jig it, and it's also a finesse bait. If those fish are locked up, I can get them to hit that thing. The other thing that's neat about it, you know, I'm a guy, I'll be honest with you, I don't start out a fishing trip with scent, but if that bite's tough, that's one of the things I go to. Well, the slab bite, you can put it in the eye hole, but also this thing in its belly has a little hole perfectly cut out for a slab bite. So that's a bait. The more I use it, the more I like it. So that's number 2. But I'm going to stay with jigs because the third is a Popeye.
Yeah.
And when I say a Popeye, I'm going to say a 1/64th ounce.
64th. You're going 64 small.
You know, and the reason I say that, and again, I live in Ohio, so we have severe cold fronts coming in the spring. And Matt, my lake is only 6 foot deep. It was hand dug in the 1800s. There's no drops or ledges.
Were you in on that?
I watched it. Okay, you dog. So, but you know, a cold front in that shallow water will affect our fish something fierce. And I've downsized to 1/32, this and that, and I can't get them to bite. When I put that 1/64th ounce Popeye, it looks like it's nothing. I can get those fish to hit that. And I'll tell you a funny story about the Popeye. We had a show air a couple months ago from Blue Marsh Lake out in eastern Pennsylvania. And I was fishing with Mitch, and the day that we got there, he told me, he says, they lowered this lake 13 inches overnight, and they're still lowering it. He had been killing them on a regular crappie magnet. And we started out using that. They absolutely would not touch it. And it was to the point where I thought, well, we're not going to get this show. And he said, let's try these Popeyes. And I'm telling you, it took forever for the jig there was a log we were fishing underwater, which turned out to be the savior for us that day. But it took forever for that thing to get down there.
Watch it paint dry.
Yes. But you had to be patient. And Matt, we would do a very, very slow retrieve with it. And even then, you know, we talk about rod sensitivity. You didn't feel anything. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to lie to you. You didn't feel a tick. You didn't feel a thump. But the rod would just seem a little heavy, almost like you were caught on a branch. Mm-hmm. You better set the hook. Yep. And I'm telling you, I tried that same thing with a regular crappie magnet that day. I could not get them to hit it. But they would take that
small profile, almost like fluttering above them.
Exactly.
Just
and I don't know if it looks like a small insect to them. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, on those cold front days, that's something I have to have in my boat for sure.
Yeah. I use the heck out of them Popeye jigs.
Yeah.
But I like to step it up. I use the 16th.
Yeah.
I almost wish that they would come out with an 8th.
Yeah.
Just because I use a lot bigger jigs, but man, an 8th in that thing, oh my gosh. I feel like it'd be so deadly.
Yes, sir, man. It would,
but,
no doubt.
And even casting, though, you take like those 64th ounce, you know, with the right setup, you're able to cast that 30, 35 foot probably, 30. I mean, with the 64th ounce, you're casting it 30 foot. And I mean, you think that's not that far, but out on the lake, when you're looking at a fish out there, 30 foot's a pretty good cast with a 64th ounce jig.
It is.
You know.
And the casting's not really the problem. Like I say, I think it's just having that patience to let that thing fall to where it needs to be.
Yeah. Well, and having the boat control at the same time. Because if you've got the wind that day, the wind's pushing you off of that spot or that fish, and then you're trying to wait 40 seconds for that jig to fall down to those fish, or 30 seconds even for it to fall down to that fish, and you don't have good boat control, you're done.
Exactly.
That's the key. I tell people, I do those live scope classes out on the lake. I tell people boat control is key. You can be the best fisherman in the world, but if you can't stay on the fish or the brush pile you're wanting to fish, then it is what it is.
Exactly, man. And how many times have you interviewed like national champions or, winners of a big tournament, and how many times have they told you boat control was the key?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
because know as well as I do that tournament days aren't on bright, sunshiny days. It's more like days like we're having out here today where it's 25 mile an hour wind and raining, and it's just one of them things. Yep. And that's what I feel like proves the best of the best when you throw in boat control into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are we on?
That was 3.
That was 3. Now we're on 4.
So number 4, the thing I want to talk about came about, I don't want to say by accident, but by chance. We picked up a sponsor, Stan Slip Bobbers, okay? And as you know, fishing shallow water a lot, I use a cork. Mainly I was using the crappie magnet, the trout cork. It's pegged. most of the fish I catch are about 18 inches under surface on my home lake. The problem I have, and the first time I ever met Chris was at our Columbus boat show. He was in our booth, and introduced myself, this and that. We got talking. He says, "Is there anything that you'd like to see?" Well, I'm not bashful. I said, "Actually, there is." And I told him, I said, "Here's the problem I have." I said, "When I shoot under a pontoon or under a dock, if the fish are active," and what I mean by that, folks, is as that line is dropping, they're hitting it on the drop, or if they don't hit it as it drops, as I start my retrieve, they're chasing it, bam, okay? So normally, if that bites on, I don't even have a cork on, man. It's like just shoot it under there. The problem is, again, going back to the cold fronts, if a cold front comes in, I still go by with my live scope. I'll see where those fish are suspended. If they have moved down deep, you can't peg that thing,
right,
and fish it that deep. It's hard to do.
At 6 or 8 foot, it's hard to do.
It is, because your jig goes in and that cork has to follow that trajectory. Yeah. So the problem was, when our fish shut down, they shut down. So when I would shoot under there without a cork, because I couldn't do it, because I'm not putting a sinker on there and all that stuff, if they didn't hit it when it dropped, they're not chasing anything. So you're just casting and retrieving.
Almost like a bass fisherman.
It is. And you find one stupid bass, So I told Chris, I said, I need something where, if you can picture this, if I'm shooting under a pontoon, say it's 25 foot, so I shoot under there 25 foot, I need something where I can vertical jig that slow from 25 foot away. And I said, I can't do it with a peg cork. He says, huh? And I said, Chris, here's the thing. I said, you've got slip bobbers that people use. I said, but when that bite is on like that, I said, if you're lucky, you'll see that bobber turn over on its side. That's my phone.
That's all right.
Sorry. But
go on, you're all right.
So if you're lucky, you'll see that bobber. They won't take it under, but they may turn it on its side. But I told him, I said, the reason I always use a bobber just barely big enough to hold up whatever jig size I'm using is, I said, what you're going to see a lot of times during that finicky bite, if you're lucky, you'll see it like this on the water, but you'll just see a little difference. If you can learn to see that, you're going to catch fish on the finicky conditions when no one else will. I said, the problem is, with the slip bobbers that he had, they're too big. You're not going to see that, or they're not going to move it. And he says, okay, I'll get on it. Well, I'm thinking, 6-7 months from now, I'll probably, man, within 2 weeks, if that, I get a shipment in the mail. He said, tries, he's called them minis. Super, super small. And the other problem, Matt, I want to tell you I had, and why this bobber is so important to me, is I tried my own things, okay? I tried putting grommets in it the way I did it, and it didn't work, because the jig head and the line would eventually get caught in there, or it would get stuck in the cork itself, so it's not dropping. Well, he has these super, super slick grommets on his, and that jig head will not get caught. And I'll tell you, folks, when I got this, I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh my goodness, and it's super small.
They are.
I just happened to be doing a seminar at the Indianapolis Boat Show 2 days after I got these. I'm up on the fish tank, and I told people, I said, this is a new product. Here's what it's supposed to do. I said, if it works, you're going to be the first ones to see it. If it needs to go back to research and development, you're going to see it. And I probably made 30, 40 flips out there doing that seminar, and every time just perfect. And luckily the fish were active that day, so they were going nuts. And it was funny, because Chris told me that Monday, because people were coming up, hey, where do we get that? I said, they're not available yet. They were still calling his office that Monday. So that allows me, if those fish move down, I can still shoot under a target, whether it's a pontoon or a dock. I can shoot down, and now I can let that drop, and I can hold it in place. And what I'm doing is just one little pop and letting it set. And one of the things from me being able to do these seminars, I made friends with a lot of these guys that run the tanks. They let me experiment. And sometimes those fish are active in those tanks, sometimes they're not. And what I'll see is when that floats on there and you just barely pop it, it may only raise that jig that much. So it comes up, it settles down. Well, you'll see those fish when it comes up like that, they'll position, it'll get their attention, but they won't take it. But then after it sets for several seconds, you'll see them come up and mouth it, and not move. And I'm telling you, if you're going by feel, you won't feel that. But that's when you see that little bobber, just maybe a quarter.
Right.
And I'll tell you, so I'm excited about that. It is that quick became one of my top things. So, and he just came out. We talked about 64th ounce. Guess what he sent me to use here? It's called a mini.
Oh my God!
It'll hold up a 64th, and it's smaller than the minis. So I'll have to show you one here. But you're sworn to secrecy.
Yeah, right. I got you.
The last thing, and I use it. I am not a tournament fisherman anymore, so I use it a lot different than anyone else does, and it's sort of a combination for me. It's a live scope. I have never, ever, and I've been in the industry a while, I've never seen anything affect the fishing community like live scope did. Seeing all this stuff happening live time. Now, the tournament fishermen, I did a show with Tom Hankins. I like to do a show with a tournament guy each year, showing how they use the live scope, because it's different for everyone. You know, the big way to win a tournament now, basically the only way anymore, is to chase a single fish. I'm too old for that. I'm old school, okay? It's too much work, and it is work. So all you tournament fishermen, I'm not cutting you down. You guys have earned those fish you catch that way. It's outstanding. But for me, it's not me. And when I first got my live scope, I was like everyone else. I was mesmerized, and my head is glued to the screen. But I still like enjoying my surroundings. So what I do now, if I pull up to a brush pile, I want to see, are there fish there, or a tree, whatever? Are they there? Where are they at? And then I go back to my old style. But live scope, where it really helps what I do, whether it's shooting pontoons or shooting docks, I can go buy a row of them. I'll know where they're suspended. That's all I care about. And that live scope is just so awesome for that. And the reason I say it's a combination, they're not cheap, okay? No. And so there are 1,000 different mounts on there. And I'm not saying this to try to be a commercial, but Cornfield Fishing Gear's mount, to put those on, if I am going to invest all that money in my electronics, I want to make sure nothing happens to it. You can find cheaper mounts on there than Cornfield Fishing Gear, but I'm telling you, when it comes to solid products, that's the only thing on my boat. And the other thing is, of course, I've got to meet Mark, and I know him pretty well now. The man is a genius, and he has never stopped thinking about new items and stuff. So to me, like I say, the live scope, but I want something that I know that it's not going to fall off or break off. So the Cornfield fish, it goes hand in hand.
Sturdy built.
Exactly.
Made in the USA, sturdy built stuff. I mean, it's.
And Matt, and you know, I told you I don't want to turn this into a commercial. Here's where you can know I'm sincere about this. The buddy that I used to fish tournaments with, we have been friends for 40 years. Okay, he called me 2 weeks ago. And he said, hey, he says, I just bought a boat because my kid's in high school bass fishing now. He said, all I've got's a duck boat. He said, I bought a bass boat. He says, and I bought a live scope. He says, listen, he said, we're friends. He said, tell me the truth. He says, is it worth paying the extra money for that cornfield? I said, absolutely, man. And he knows, I would have told him no if that was the case. And he said, are there any codes out there for discount? I said, I don't know. And so I called Mark. Mark actually had a scratch and dent. So my buddy called him, ended up ordering a lot more than just that. Yeah. So, I don't lie to anyone, but especially my buddies that have, been around. So those are my top five.
Absolutely.
And there's so many other things, but those are five things I want on my boat at all times.
There's so much little stuff that you're like, sunscreen, I gotta have this, I gotta have it, but when you think
bologna and cheese, it, man.
Yeah. So when you dig down to the meat and taters of what make you a more successful angler day in and day out on the water, those are those top 5 products.
You're right, and I'm glad you're doing this segment because every angler is going to be different, and a lot of it is what you have had success with in the past, and you have confidence in, and those are the items for me.
Awesome. Well, Russ, I sure do appreciate you coming on the show,
brother. It's always good talking to you, man. We need to get a show on brushpile fishing.
We need to get another one. Is what we need to do.
I know.
On my home lake.
And that's what I meant. I want to go to your home lake and do something you're comfortable with, because, and like we did the show in Tennessee, but a lot of times when I do these shows, I like it for the guest it to be their home lake, because they can tell people, this is why this is my part of heaven right here.
And this is why I use this here.
Exactly.
Things.
We can use your top 5 products.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
All right, man.
Awesome.
It's always a pleasure, brother.
Thanks, Russ. I appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.